It's coming on. No, it's really not. Goodness me, England scraping through in the European Championships. Declan Rice being a key figure in that game, and Bukayo Saka having to play left back. Goodness me, we thought we'd never see it, but we have. This is today's Arsenal transfer show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time, talking all the latest Arsenal transfer news, views and news. Thank you for you all for tuning in. Appreciate your time as per, and thank you as well for helping us continue our 1K everyday like challenge. I understand my role. I get it. Sometimes I have to push you. Sometimes I have to give you that little bit of a nudge and a reminder that, of course, this challenge is very important, that we need to keep it going. So thank you to those that continue to drop 1,000 likes plus on these shows. If you could, of course, do that on today's show to help that challenge continue, I would be ever so grateful. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box today. We've got James and Martin and other Martin, Damien, Chris, Paul, Stephen Olawale, Carlton, Bernie, Angela, NSW, Temi, Pika, Who, Juice, Jose, Trader Mike. We've got Stevie and Brad and Shari and Paul. Good morning to Mr. Ree, who's now been a member for 11 months. Fantastic stuff. Matt G in the chat as well. Tom, Colin, Vivian, and plenty more of you guys and girls too. So thank you for you all for tuning in. Appreciate your time. Without further ado, we're going to jump into today's stories. I'll be very real with you. There's not a lot. Arsenal news is, I'll tell you what, the fact that we do these shows at 8 a.m. every day, if anything, is becoming a challenge. But we love it and we do it and we'll continue to do it, even if the news is not particularly forthcoming. I'm sure it will pick up this month and we'll talk about that shortly. But yes, it's quiet in the Arsenal world this week. But England have done their best to provide us with some talking points. England narrowly beating Slovakia yesterday. I was at a wedding yesterday, enjoying myself, having a great time. I wasn't actually able to watch the game live. I've since been able to watch back the highlights from the game. But as the speeches were going on, there were people dotted around the room with mobile phones, and all of a sudden you started to get little fist pumps going. And when Foden scored, which turned out to be offside, there was a false dawn in the room with people celebrating and then realizing, of course, that the goal had been ruled out. The signal in the area was not good either, so we were kind of relying upon like little drips of updates throughout the game. When it went to extra time, to be honest, but when it went to added time in the 90 minutes and we're still 1-0 down, I'd kind of made my peace of it. I was like, great, Southgate's going to go. So I'd kind of made my peace with losing to Slovakia. And then, of course, Jude Bellingham pops up with an unbelievable overhead kick and gets England back into the game. And then Harry Kane, of course, within the first minutes. It's amazing how you can go from not scoring in 90 minutes to scoring twice within 2 playing minutes. It's absolutely crazy, but that is the reality of the game. And England, of course, go through. And Declan Rice had a very good game. 109 touches, 100% tackles, 100% dribbles completed, 90% pass accuracy, 80 passes completed, 7 out of 7 long passes completed, 6 out of 6 ground duels, 4 out of 4 tackles, 3 shots, 2 interceptions, and he hit the post once as well. He had a very, very good game indeed. And, when it comes to Bukayo Saka as well, having to move to that left-back position and then right wing-back position, everything changing in the added time, it was all very much a necessary change. And it keeps Southgate, in position. It keeps him holding on to the reins of the England job. As I said before, England could go on to win the European Championships and I'd still change the coach, because I just cannot see any input of Southgate's improving this side. The only reason England are even still in the competition is because of the players and the quality of the players that England have got. And, when it comes to debates surrounding Arteta and debates surrounding Southgate, it's a really good example of where a manager who has had zero to little effect on the positive output of his team and instead relies upon the quality of his players to get through games shines through as only England can. And then you have England you have Arsenal, of course, who with Arteta, is directly responsible for the improvement of players, the development of the philosophy, the way we dominate games, how we batter teams left, right, and centre, and have progressed us into, of course, an established title challenging position. And that's just the difference between England and Arsenal, despite the players being somewhat similar across the side, and the quality, of course, that's so even obviously there more so than it is for Arsenal. And yet England, of course, play worse, dramatically worse than Arsenal do. But yes, England will play Switzerland. Granit Xhaka will reunite with Bukayo Saka in the last 8 of the quarterfinals of the European Championships. And we can keep our fingers crossed that England's players continue to do the business, if you are, of course, of an English persuasion. Now, I talked about this link yesterday. Archie Gray seemed destined for Brentford, a player that, from my perspective, Arsenal should certainly have an interest in. But despite their name being mentioned briefly yesterday, that deal to Brentford has somewhat crumbled, as Brentford have been unable to agree a fee with Leeds. However, when it comes to a player like Archie Gray, Spurs being the team that could sign him is a frustrating reality, a very, very frustrating reality. And I really hope that they don't get hold of Archie Gray, because it would be a very good signing for them. And there's like kind of a little part of me that hopes Arsenal are watching this closely and now, go into the market and hijack it for themselves, because he is by far the best young player in the Championship last season, and there's a reason why all the big clubs are looking at him. And Arsenal could do with another midfielder, because I think Arsenal could look to sign a midfielder, and of course still sign one with Jorginho and Partey's time at the club coming to a close. Partey could leave. Jorginho has 1 year left. He'll stay here for this season. It could be a great understudy. And having central midfielders, of course, I know he's not like a out-and-out number 6, but just having, that midfield depth and those options and that talent would be great. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that suddenly we hear something about Arsenal going in themselves for Archie Gray. But hopefully he can get something done. But I don't see it happening. I'm manifesting this one at this stage. But with it being July, of course, it being the 1st of July, it's still certainly not time to panic. Don't you worry about that. But it is, of course, now the period where we expect transfers to start picking up for not just Arsenal, but of course for plenty of clubs, as the profit and sustainability deadline has now passed. Teams like Everton, Newcastle, Villa, Chelsea will be judged based upon whether or not they were able to get in enough funds. We know Newcastle let both Anderson and Minter leave Newcastle yesterday for Nottingham Forest and for Brighton, respectively. And they still kept, as I mentioned, it had always been overblown what Newcastle needed to do. They kept Guimaraes, they kept Isak, and had no intention of letting either of those players leave, unless, of course, it was for the release clause of Guimaraes, which was £100 million, which, of course, is now expired. Arsenal will be looking to do business this window. I am told that they are very confident the squad will be stronger come the end of the market. And of course, there has been interest in a number of players. But with the European Championships and the Copa America still ongoing, that will provide still some obstacles in terms of players. But with those group stages now done, with the last 16 coming to a close today and tomorrow, of course, we hope that Arsenal will start to kick things into gear. We'll be bringing you even more news surrounding Arsenal transfers in the coming weeks and months. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show where, of course, we jump into the chat box and tackle as many of your thoughts, questions, queries, and theories as we can. So we're going to jump and go through some of your comments. I did highlight one I wanted to discuss. My wriggle here with a comment in response to the Southgate Arteta comparison says, got to be honest, Tom, you can't compare Arsenal and England. Arsenal train together for 8 to 9 months of the year. England only train for 1 to 2. I never get this argument. I never, ever understand this argument, because for me, if you cannot, as a manager, as a head coach of an international, I was going to say club then, but just of a country, a manager of a country, if you cannot work to those confines, if you cannot get the best from those players by the short, limited amount of time that you have with them, don't do it. This isn't an excuse. This is the reality. This is the situation for every team, every country. And Southgate has been in this job for years and years and years. Let's not pretend that there's any excuse here, because there isn't. International managers all work to these restrictions. You look at how Spain are getting on under a very new coach in De La Fuente. It's still a very new coach for them, and he has to work with them in the same amount of time than Southgate has to work with English players of what I would consider, and as a massive lover of Spanish football and of the Spanish national team, England have a better squad by a distance of individual players than Spain do. And yet you look at what is happening with that Spain team. You look at how he's getting the best from those Spain players. The only reason that England will win the Euros, if indeed they do, is because of the players they have, not because of the manager's philosophy, style, improvement, coaching, development, anything. It just doesn't. And so I'm sorry, but when it comes to talking about the comparisons between team chemistry, yes, Arteta has longer with those players, but if you don't, you have to work to those restrictions. So it never, ever is a reasonable comparison to make. And that as an excuse for me just doesn't work at all. Jean says it's a strange no one is mentioning no chance of a player can be at their best all year. They're trained to be fit in the season. And why does no one use Premier League as an argument as to why they don't perform at the Euros? Again, Jean, because every other nation's players also play loads of football throughout the year. The Spanish team have got players in the Bundesliga, in La Liga, in England, in France, and yet they're still playing to a high regard. We're watching Germany have a very good tournament as well, although they didn't have the most amazing performances against Denmark, but still looking great, and had players play all throughout the season. It's the same for everyone. It's the same situation, which gives us this ability to compare nations, compare so much better. And there just simply is not an excuse. Rob says England's team is the perfect analogy of the England in general. Good people struggling hard whilst being held back and hamstrung by a broken system led by inept leaders refusing to take responsibility. I don't want to go too much deep into politics, especially considering what's happening in 3 days' time here in the UK. But I can see where you're coming from, mate. Runs with Cow says, what is Southgate's resume? I don't remember what he did before the England job. He was the England under-21 coach. He also managed Middlesbrough and took them into European competition and rather romantically took them all the way, to a European final as well. So that's what he did do before the England job. Matt G says, Tom, have you thought about making up some news? Today, Arsenal have been linked with a swap deal of Nelson for Lamine Yamal. Somehow, Matt, I don't think people are going to believe that. No, we don't make up stuff for the sake of it. We'll discuss news, and if there's a slow news day, which it certainly is, surrounding everything today, we'll be doing our best to talk to you a lot more and answer a lot more of your questions. So yes, but no, we will not be making up news, Matt. Not a chance. Big says, Tom, between Archie Gray and Adam Wharton, who do you think is the better now and who has the highest ceiling? I think that Adam Wharton is better. He's obviously playing and a more accomplished at a higher level, and he's slightly older, of course, than Gray too, and now he's in the England national team. So you have to say that Wharton is obviously the better player, but they're both fantastic players. I think that both of their ceilings are incredibly high. So I'd expect to see plenty more of them moving forwards. Frida says, hey, Tom, what do you make of Douglas Luiz going to Juventus? I think the deal in the end, did it not get revealed that the fee was much higher than was initially being discussed? £42.4 million. Aston Villa sanctioned the £42.4 million sale of Douglas Luiz to alleviate concerns about meeting Premier League's profit and sustainability regulations. This week, Villa also completed the eye-catching deal of £37.5 million of Ian Martson as well, and they also added Lewis Dobbin from Everton. And these deals helped them with PSR. Chelsea signed Amari Kellyman, and they also got rid of Tim Aragunam as well. So he went to Everton, I believe. But I thought they got some Juventus players in as well. In a separate deal, Villa are expected to sign 20-year-old Juventus forward Samuel Illing Jr., a former Chelsea youth product, and 23-year-old midfielder Enzo Baranecchia. I think they are being signed in the next round of deals, if you like, for PSR reasons. So, yeah, lots of deals going on. What do I think of Luiz going to Juve? He's a good player, of course, but Aston Villa had no interest in selling him to Arsenal. And I think Arsenal's interest seemingly has waned a little bit over the last year as well, it seems. Ben says, I still can't believe he actually played Saka at left back instead of taking Foden off much earlier. Southgate is managing the national team of Twitter pundits. I mean, I still can't believe he didn't call up Tyrick Mitchell. Why wouldn't you call up Tyrick? You've limited yourself massively. You've got a player that's had a good season, for Crystal Palace, and you've decided not to call him up. It makes absolutely no sense. This is a guy that's got England caps. He's played twice for England before. It's not like he's new to the scene, even though you've decided to call it Adam Wharton. I cannot wrap my head around why you wouldn't call up a player who played 37 of the 38 Premier League games for Palace last season as a left back, as a left wing back as well. It made absolutely no sense for that not to happen. Baron says, hi, Tom. What's your honest opinion on going to places like Anfield, Old Trafford, and the Etihad with a midfield of Rice, Eze, and Ødegaard? I mean, it's brave. It's definitely brave, mate. I'm not going to lie. I think it would cause quite the stir if Arsenal went to do that. And it may leave us a bit open, but who knows? Maybe we dominate the ball more. Maybe we do better in those opportunities as well. King says, Tom, should Arsenal push hard for Williams? He looks electric and exciting on the left wing. He looks like a great player, but I don't think that it's going to happen. The wage structure, signing on fees, the money involved, the happiness he has, of course, at Athletic Club too. It doesn't seem that, even though I'd be very keen on seeing Nico Williams come to Arsenal, I don't think that is a deal that is going to happen. I don't think he's necessarily going to move anywhere unless he, is in a situation where he's willing to maybe not take a pay cut, but to not have as much of a financial boost of moving to Arsenal. And just the idea of being at Arsenal should be enough for plenty of players. And Damien also says, is there any way that we can fit Nico Williams into our wage structure, perhaps a higher signing on fee and a reduced basic wage? It's very difficult. It seems very difficult. He's great talent, but the money involved for that deal would be, for a player of that age and not yet played in the Premier League, would be absolutely massive. And Tobecco says, do you know any chance why there is a larger percentage of players that are right-footed compared to such a small percentage that are left-footed? There is in general. It's not just in football. It's in general. It is thought, so this is just me reading off Google. It is thought because left cerebral hemispheres of the brain controls the right side of the body, the right side is generally stronger. It is suggested the left cerebral hemisphere is dominant over the right in most humans because 90 to 92% of all humans, they have a left hemisphere is what's described as the language hemisphere. It's to do with your brain. Your left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. Your right side of the brain controls the left side of your body. And the left side of your brain is more dominant across most people, or just in general. But some people still turn out to be left-footed over right-footed. It's to do with the brain. So lots of deep thoughts in today's show and some biology we've gone through. That's how quiet it is. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. But it's worth doing a Google of looking into it to get a greater understanding than I can provide to you. Enigma says, would definitely love Onana for Everton and Williams from Spain. Onana just not convinced me enough. I've not seen enough from him. Chima says, just tuning in. Thanks for your commitment, Tom, despite all the lack of Arsenal news at the moment. You're very welcome, my friend. Ike says, sorry for getting bang in the background, by the way, we've got lots of construction going on. Ike says, or EK, I always get the two. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Do let me know if I'm wrong. What do you think about Arsenal making a cheeky bid for Mason Greenwood? Seems forgotten by everyone. Yeah, there's a reason why, mate. And no, I wouldn't sign Mason Greenwood. P Sharp says, the only winger I genuinely see us signing is Neto. Play both sides, 23 years old, won't demand daft wages, won't cost a ridiculous fee. I think we'll gamble on his injury record and fitness. I think Neto, of course, is one of those options that would be a fantastic signing if he can stay fit. And that is the biggest question mark. That is the biggest situation for Neto is can the guy stay fit? I don't know is the honest answer. I don't know if he can stay fit, and it's a lot of money to put into a deal as well. for a player when you don't know. He's the only player out there really who I'm very much like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can justify it. And I know I've said on record before that, do I even look at injury records anymore? Because players are just injured all the time, or they're never injured. They come to Arsenal, they get injured. So it's very difficult. Max Stays Black says, Johan Bakayoko, break the bank for him. I think that when it comes to a player like that, it's going to be very difficult. Not because Arsenal couldn't afford a deal for Bakayoko. I think they could. But he's very specialised as a left-footed right winger. And as a player, from what we've heard from sources close to the player on the Netherlands side of things, he wants to get guarantees about minutes and game time. That's not going to happen at Arsenal as a left-footed right winger because of Bukayo Saka. And so because of that situation, it's very unlikely, which is why Nico Williams and for me, Mohamed Kudus stand out as two options because they can play on either side and so can offer you lots of depth. Kudus can also play as an attacking midfielder and as a centre forward should you need him to. So that's why I think Mohamed Kudus is without question the best one for us. Sweater Merlot says it's so quiet. Even the dodgy ITKs aren't saying anything. And that's because there's a number of reasons as to why. And I wrote an article about this last year when we started, 2 years ago, sorry, I wrote an article about this. Arsenal under Arteta have put in a lot of effort to try and minimize the exposure of the work that goes on in transfers. There is a big intention from the club to be quieter about what they do and what they want to do. They want to be able to, they want to be able to do some really good business without alerting other clubs to their own intentions because it helps them in negotiations. They can do everything they can on their side to try and do this. What they can't control is the players' side, leaks, intermediaries. Now, it seems pretty much all the leaks have, been found out. Arteta did a big thing in kind of weeding out some of the leaks, it seems. Even some players, perhaps, that were leaking information too, which was really, really important for the club. And, for speaking from a journalist point of view, yes, we love to get a scoop. Yes, we love to get a story and find out some information about transfers. Transfers are, ironically, as someone who covers them on a daily basis, my least favorite thing as a reporter to cover because they're so volatile. There's so much noise that no one's ever grateful, really, for the amount of transfer scoops people have. It's all about what's next. Just look at the replies to any tweet by Fabrizio Romano or who I believe to be the best in the business in terms of David Ornstein. And all you get is not people thanking them for their updates, not thanking reporters for being able to get brilliant scoops and brilliant stories. It's, what about this guy? What about this guy? What's next? Are we signing anyone else? And it is not it's not a grateful business reporting on transfers. And that's why I prefer to do kind of Arsenal specific news around, injuries or kind of the news surrounding the club, more specifically like friendlies and pre-season tournaments, like I've been telling you for a while now, that there's an expectation of a third American friendly to be announced that we revealed here as well. These types of stories is what I prefer to cover. I love transfers in general, but reporting on them is it's a thankless task, a very thankless task indeed. Stu says, makes me laugh, people attacking Saka and Rice for England. Not one of the players can hold their heads up so far this tournament. Why do people focus on individual players? There's a number of reasons for individual players in particular getting kind of more attention than others. Rice and Saka have the tag of playing for Arsenal. Arsenal in general do tend to attract a lot more scrutiny and criticism than players for other clubs. And Saka is black. And sadly, the systemic racism that exists within this sport will attract a greater level of scrutiny towards someone like Saka. And it's horrible. And more needs to be done about this. It continually frustrates me as we talk so openly and honestly about these topics. I can't stand it when people say, keep politics out of football. Politics and football are intrinsically, economically, and socially linked and always will be. I don't even necessarily agree with the terminology of politics when talking about the problem of racism in sport either. It's a bit of a strange response, isn't it? Because politics for me is more so you're looking at the parties and the running of the country and things like this. Politics is a broad term that gets misused, and I'd much rather talk about this as an integral social issue that needs to be addressed and talked about and raised awareness of more. And Saka and Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford, of course, have all suffered horrific racist abuse because of something they cannot control, being the color of their skin. And we've had a lot of conversations yesterday. I had some sadly horrific comments after we discussed the Pride March. Some pretty terrible people, sadly, still exist and aren't willing to be open-minded or educated on these things and believe things that they've been told that aren't true, or just make assumptions as well. And it's a real shame, but we try and fight the good fight. I also discussed this term virtue signaling, which you may have heard come up in the sphere. I think it's one of the worst phrases, worst terms ever to be brought into the English language. Because for those that aren't aware of what virtue signaling is, the term itself basically means that it's a term labeled to people that others assume are trying to raise awareness, do good deeds, bring attention to worthy causes for their own benefit, is basically what it means. And for that reason, they use it as kind of you're trying to make yourself look good by talking about it. No, it's nothing to do with that. It's because we need to fight the good fight. We need to talk about these problems. We need to make sure that we address them and bring them into the forefront of the conversation. So Nicola says, what's the knocking in the background? I said earlier, apologies, there is construction going on outside. So I can't stop the knocking in the background because, it's 8:30 in the morning. That's pretty early. I suppose it's Monday. I guess it, but I still think that's pretty early to start construction outside. But there you go. Let's go to boom, boom, boom. Damien says, looking at the City players with England, you would wonder how City won the league with some of these. Yeah, Walker and Stones have not had the best of tournaments so far. Let's go to scrolling down a little bit more. Ben says, I keep hearing that we're sure signing a German international after the Euros. Have you heard anything about this? So this German player signing thing, obviously, you may have seen a video that went round over the weekend of a guy on a phone talking about cars and somebody moving to the UK. And on the phone was this person saying, oh, yes, I know someone who's moving to Arsenal from Germany. And then we also saw Jeff Arsenal, who, if you don't follow, of course, has been on the Arsenal Twitter sphere for as long as I can feasibly remember. He also put a tweet out which basically hinted towards, I think it was Jeff, put a tweet out basically hinting towards Arsenal would be signing a German player. It seemed to be pretty tongue-in-cheek. So I don't know how real or accurate it is. Jeff's got some contacts, without question, he gets some information. But I think that's what we're doing. I think that's the situation at the moment as well. So I have no idea whether or not there's accuracy or legitimacy to those stories, to those links. But it'd be great if it was Joshua Kimmich. We can all speculate about who we think that it is, but who knows? Who knows at this stage? Kish says, you mentioned Kudus as a good option across many positions. Can he play the left 8 role? I haven't really seen him play a left 8 position, so I don't necessarily think it would be an option for us, but never say never. Paul says there's 863 of you watching. Actually, there's 1,148 across Twitter and YouTube as well. If you're listening on Twitter, by the way, and you wonder how all these people are leaving comments, join us on YouTube, and you can leave your comments and get involved in the conversation as well. So please do. And Paul says there's 863 of us watching on YouTube. There's more now, and 262 likes. Come on, TGT Global Community. Let's get those likes up and get to our 1K every day for the best of our transfers. We can hope so. Jelly says, Lol, the question about right-footed and left-footed is the typical default arrangement for humans to be right-handed and therefore also right-footed. Yeah, I say it's a really interesting kind of, is it neurology? What's the word? Neurology? Is that it? Like neuroscience? I assume that's it. So yeah, do some research into it. It's very interesting indeed. On Devolis is, like you said, it's something you can't control. And this is what I mean. And it comes into the conversation. I know we're getting deep again, and we do on this channel. I don't shy away from these really hard topics to talk about. It's incredibly frustrating, And I, as a straight white guy, I've lived a very privileged life and have never experienced racism. I've never experienced homophobia. I cannot ever put my headspace into somebody's own that has suffered those. I can't imagine the pain, the frustration, the in some ways, isolation that some people must feel when suffering these awful things. And with the sexism side as well, of course, that we also discuss on a regular basis in this year in particular with the women's football and the comments that get left, of course, surrounding women's football. Things that people cannot control, their skin color, their gender, their sexuality, and to be insulted, abused based upon these things that people cannot control and that they don't choose it's wrong. I mean, abuse for anything is wrong, but in particular these topics that we talk about where it's about things that you cannot control, so it's a cruel world we live in, says Ondavoli, and you're right, but hopefully we can do what we can to make it that little bit better by talking about it and calling out the people, of course, that want to continue making it a very horrible place at times to live in. Steve says Havertz missed so many chances in the last Germany game. It's a worry. You don't get so many chances in the Premier League. Love him, but he's not clinical enough to be our main guy. Steve, I think he's proven you wrong on a weekly basis for Arsenal, mate. I saw a thing the other day saying if Havertz had our penalties this season, he would have been runner-up in the Golden Boot competition. So just to say that again, if Havertz was our penalty taker last season, he would have been runner-up in the Premier League in the Golden Boot race. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into actually how impressive Havertz has been. Rahul says there is still a good chance for Osimhen to come. For Osimhen, Arsenal seems to be the best place for him. Romano stated that he'll be leaving. I think that he's the best forward available on the market. What are your thoughts? I don't. I've talked about this before. His numbers are not good enough in comparison to a player like Havertz to justify the money that it would take to go and get him through the door. So I cannot say that I'm in the camp that would bring Victor Osimhen to the club. Northern Goodness says people say no news is good news, but I beg to differ. We need some good Arsenal news soon. I hope that we do, mate. I really do. I am going to bring the show to an end, not because I want to, but the noise outside is getting rather loud. You can probably hear some of it. You've heard some banging. There's now sawing and drilling going on. So I'm going to bring that to an end because I'm feeling that it may start impacting on the quality of the audio for today's show. And I'd rather not have that inflicted upon your ears for too much longer. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Appreciate your time as always. Have a fantastic day and enjoy the start to your week. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. Really important, that words. And it has been over the last few weeks because some of you may have seen a tweet I put out the other day. The abuse levels on this platform, on Twitter and social media are going through the roof, and it makes it much, much harder to do this job. It really does. I don't talk about my own situation too much because I think there are people out there that suffer a lot more than I do, and I think it's more important to talk about them, but it's been tough of late. So thank you for the support. Thank you for the kind words. And if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe and all that usual YouTube stuff, it's the small thing to help the channel continue to grow and hopefully spread some really important messages. Stay safe and well, and I'll speak to you very soon, tomorrow morning, in fact. And as always, up the Arsenal.